Good afternoon, everyone. This is the second part in the pdfToolbox automation webinar series. The first one was actually last week about pdfToolbox server, and what I wanted to start with was going to our support website, actually, that is support.4piece.com. If you go there, you can click on tutorials, and if you do that, there is a list of all these webinars that we give. Almost all of them are recorded. I think there are one or two that are missing because of technical difficulties, but typically when we give a webinar, you can find a recording online a few days afterward. And the first of these automation webinars is already here. That was about pdfToolbox server, so you can always go back and view that one if you missed that. For today, I have again prepared a very long presentation of exactly one slide with an agenda, and the rest of this will be demonstration, because that's what we're really here for. And it will be, just as a warning, even more technical today than last week, actually. And last week was about pdfToolbox server, so that involves still quite a bit of user interface interaction. This is about the command line version and showing what you can do with the command line and how you can make your life a little easier working with the command line when you have to do an integration with pdfToolbox. So I have roughly the topics on here that I want to talk about, and that serves to give you an idea of what we'll be talking about, but it also serves me in order to not forget anything while I'm going through this. To talk a little bit about CLI, or command line, versus server. Last week we talked about server and hot folder processing. Today we talk about command line. So what's the big difference between those two? As I explained last week, we have a little bit of a marketing or historical difference in naming these products. We call pdfToolbox server the thing that you can download for Mac and Windows. When we talk about Linux, historically that was called command line, because there is no user interface application on Linux or Unix. It's simply the engine itself. However, and that is at the same time also the easiest way to play with the command line, if you install pdfToolbox server on Mac or on Windows, then you'll get a folder that is installed. The contents of that folder look a little bit different on Mac and Windows, but in both cases, there will be a pdfToolbox app, and that's the desktop application. And there will be a folder called CLI. And in that folder called CLI, you actually find the command line itself. So even though it's called pdfToolbox server and it installs some other stuff like the desktop, in reality, you just install the command line, because the command line is also the engine that is used by the server application. And we'll come back to that when we talk about dispatcher and satellite and how these can also be used in a command line environment. The first thing perhaps to talk about a little bit, and this will be very short as well, is platforms and so on. The command line is available on all platforms that Calas supports. And the easiest way to find out what that is to go to the Calas software website, go to download. You'll see all of them listed. So we have Mac and Windows where the server is available, and then you have a number of other platforms, both a 32 and 64-bit Linux version, and a specific Unix version for Sun Solaris, and a specific IBM AIX version as well. This command line is available both for pdfToolbox and for pdfAPilot. I will work with pdfToolbox for the purpose of this webinar, but what I will say for pdfToolbox very easily translates to pdfAPilot. It works in almost exactly the same manner. So you have these versions available for different versions or different platforms if you want, and in all of those platforms they will behave the same, and you can assume that whatever you try on a Mac, for example, will also work the same way in Linux or Unix environments. Okay, so how do we get started with the command line? Well, you have to install something, of course, either the server or a server on Mac or Windows, or a command line installer on Linux. And after that, the question is, where do we find information about working with the command line? There are two ways to do this. There is in the command line folder a folder called doc that has two documentation files in it. The first one, PDF engine reference, is a quite lengthy document, 600 and almost 680 pages, as you can see, but that gives you an overview mainly of all of the what pdfToolbox engine does. So fixes, profiles, the different ways to convert colors, overview of actions, and so on. So this is a very long document with a detailed description of all of the different things that the pdfToolbox technology can do. And it is useful actually to read both when you're working with the desktop and with the server or the CLI. Let me also point out, for example, that there is a whole section on the imposition engine for pdfToolbox. The imposition engine is the topic of the webinar that I'll be doing next week, but that too can be found in this PDF engine reference. You can read the whole thing. It's, like I said, 680 pages, so you have to be quite brave to start with that. But if you have specific questions about specifically the more advanced technical topics, then there is often very valuable information in there. The second document for today is much more important, and that's the CLI reference. So that document gives you an overview of what you can do with the CLI and how it works, ranging from installation over general options for processing files, and then specific information for the different actions that the CLI can do. I always tell people that I try to read as little documentation as possible, and I'll show you in a second how you can avoid reading any of this documentation as much as possible. But just know that this document is there. It is much more manageable. It's 50 pages. It's much more manageable than the PDF engine reference, and there is a lot of useful information in here about working with the CLI. So that said, let me go to a terminal window and answer the question, if you don't want to read the documentation, then how do you go about knowing what this thing will do? Well, what I've done here is I have installed pdfToolbox server, as was said, that comes with this CLI folder, and that is where I am now in my terminal window. So you can see the same doc folder in here and the pdfToolbox application that is the actual command line application. Now, being very naive, the easiest way to get some information out of this is just saying pdfToolbox, and that will tell me that there is an argument missing, profile, well, actually everything is missing, and I get a very short summary of what pdfToolbox is expecting from me. And that shows me that I have a whole range of options that I can use. It shows me that it expects a profile and that it expects one or more PDF files to process. So if you feel brave, the first thing that you can do is simply add a profile and then a PDF file, and that should be processed. So let's see what that gives. If I go to the folder that I prepared, we'll do the same thing. pdfToolbox, it tells me it needs a profile, so I'm just going to drag it on here. You can see that the spaces in my profile name are escaped automatically by the terminal application that I'm using here. You can either do that, or you can, if the profile contains, the profile name contains spaces, you can put the name of the profile in between double quotes, and that will work as well. So this is the profile, and I'll simply add a PDF file at the end of this command line. And then when we run that, you can see the output as it is generated by pdfToolbox, and I'll get an output file. Now, this profile was here because I wanted to show some other feature. It will have not done very nice things with my input file. Actually, what I can do, and this is usually the way you work with the command line, so it's useful to show that, is I can go to the profiles window in pdfToolbox desktop. I can choose whatever profile that I want to use in the command line version. Let's say that we want to either convert or verify with pdfX1A, and I can export that. So if we export that to, for example, my desktop, that will give me a KFPX file, and then I can do exactly the same as I did before. pdfToolbox, in this case, pdfX1A verification profile, and I use an input file, and then I get a whole list of error messages out here. And why do I get error messages? Well, because this obviously was not a pdfX1A file. It didn't try to convert it. This is a verify-only profile, and thus it gives me a whole bunch of error messages. It's useful to already look at what pdfToolbox provides as output. To standard out, it writes these lines, and as you can see, that provides quite a bit of information about what happens. It gives you progress information. Each time an error occurs while it does a pre-flight check, it generates a line that starts with hits, and then the severity of the hit, in this case an error, and then a description of what exactly that error was. And then it will also give you a line that says there is something that generated errors here. This is the amount of times that happened, so the amount of objects that actually caused that particular error, and again, the description of that error. If there are any warnings that are generated, it will generate lines for each warning as well. And then you have these summary lines that give you an overview of the corrections, fix-ups, the errors, warnings, and informational items that were generated by this particular pre-flight profile. What is worth noting, especially because we're talking about the command line here, and we're talking about integration into automated processes, what is worth noting is that the output of pdfToolbox is tab delimited. So if I actually look at these, each line will have a keyword, then there is a tab, and then more columns depending on what type of line there is. The number of columns is not standardized and is not always the same for each type of line, but you can very easily read these lines and judge by the first word on each line what the information on that line would be. And for a particular product that I wrote that integrates pdfToolbox in a PHP-based website, I actually do exactly that. I process a file, I capture what pdfToolbox writes to standard out, and then I parse that information to display the number of errors and warnings at the end of the processing. Of course, you can also generate pre-flight reports, and we'll get to that. You can also do that, but just capturing the output is always going to be faster than asking pdfToolbox to generate either a PDF or an XML pre-flight report. And the information that you have here is, of course, not at all the same information as what you have in the XML report. The XML report contains much more information, but this is generated very quickly, and from a performance point of view, it's actually quite fast to intercept this and analyze this. Remark that it also gives you the duration of each file in seconds, so you'll be able to see how long pdfToolbox worked on this particular file. And this was so close to 0 that it just generates 0 seconds in this particular case. I've skipped one step, of course. The only reason that this works on my system is because I have already activated it. That is not something this is not something that would work if you just download and install but not activate. And so the first thing you have to do when you have installed pdfToolbox is to figure out how to activate it. And that brings us back to, do I need to read the documentation to do that, or are there other ways? And of course, there's other ways. Let me just show you this command, pdfToolbox help, probably the most useful command of the whole command line application. If I run that, I get a very long list. Let me scroll back up a little bit. I get a very long list of information. So this was my help command. I get the same summary as what you saw a minute ago. And then for each of these command line options that are listed here, I now have a line of explanation. And in many cases, that is enough to be able to just figure out what you need to use through simple experimentation. That's typically what I end up doing as well. These are all of the command line options that you have. If you scroll down a little bit, and you see this, this big section about reporting that we'll come back to. If I scroll down a bit more, this is actually the other way you can run pdfToolbox. In this case, you're not running a profile on a PDF file, but you're running a command. And again, this gives you the list of commands that you can run with pdfToolbox. And interestingly enough, there is one here that says key code, request activation code. So we could guess that this is the command that we need to request an activation code from Callas, and then I have an activate command that I can use to activate that license.txt file that you typically get back through email from the Callas activation server. A couple of things to notice. Some of these commands have short and long versions. They actually do the same. So I can do pdfToolbox-k or pdfToolbox-key code. All of the long commands start with a double dash at the front. You can use either. For some reason, for me, it's much easier to remember the long version of the command than the short version, but feel free to use whatever you want. And this is, again, very important, if you know which command you want to use, key code in our instance, I can go back to this help command and then simply say help and follow that with the command that I want to use. And when I do that, I get some more explanation about that particular command. More specifically, I get an explanation of only those parameters that are useful for the command that I want to run. So when I'm using the key code command, this is the way I'm supposed to use it. pdfToolbox will expect a name, a company, and a license code. So that tells me that I can type -- key code, and remember about arguments and file names and so on that contain spaces. I could type this, and then the third parameter that I need to enter here is a license code. I won't do that right now because I would have to look that up. But if you just copy a license code, pdfToolbox will return all of the information that you need to email to Callas to get a license.txt file. And then after that, you can run the activate command. And if you look at the help for activate, the only thing that that expects is that license file that was returned from Callas. And after that, you'll have a valid license on your system. By the way, you can actually, I don't really need to look it up. If you're only interested in trying the application, I can, instead of a license code, add the word trial. The explanation for what you can add here is here. So you can do trial for a regular server or trial dispatcher for a server license for pdfToolbox dispatcher. We'll come back to that. or I can do trial add-on when I'm requesting a license, a temporary license for the device link add-on for pdfToolbox command line. So if I run this, and actually I can do that, when I run this, I get this text, and the only thing you need to do is copy and paste this into an email. You have the email address it needs to be sent to in the actual text. And then afterwards, the license.txt file that you get back can be used with the activate option. You can see here as well, and I'll just point it out while we're here, that a trial license for pdfToolbox server or command line, you can see here again that it's the same animal, that a trial license is always for unlimited CPUs. The standard license for pdfToolbox server or CLI allows you to process 8 files in parallel. The trial license is always unlimited, and it's always for all platforms. A production license is typically specific for a particular platform. But so you have this documentation file that is installed in that doc folder, but remember that you have access to the help command and then help for a specific command, and that will give you an overview of all of the options and parameters that are useful for a particular command. If I show you one that has slightly more options, save as image, and you'll see that in this case, save as image has quite a number of different options that you can use. But at least by doing this, you get an overview of those options that are only relevant for this particular action. And actually, with these lines of explanation for each of these parameters, it's usually possible to simply confirm through a little experimentation that this will exactly do what you thought it would do. Go back to the agenda for a second. So we've already run a particular profile on this file, but I do want to show you one more thing in this sense. What I've executed here was a regular profile, a question that I get a lot, and the answer is actually very, very easy, is if you go to pdfToolbox desktop, I have these lists of profiles here. I also have something that is called process plans. If we open one of those process plans, you remember that a process plan is completely different than a profile. A profile is a collection of checks and fixes that are executed in some order that pdfToolbox thinks makes sense. A process plan is a collection of steps where you get to decide in which order these steps are executed, and where you also have conditional processing. I could say if my first fix-up fails, then I want to simply end this process here because the rest doesn't really make any sense anymore. So these process plans, the question I often get is, how can I run these in an automated fashion with the command line? Well, actually, it's very simple. You simply go to export. You can see that the export menu item is still called export profile, even though I have a process plan selected. The reason for that is if I export that process plan, I get a KFBX file, just as what I would get if I export a regular pre-flight profile. And if we go to the command line, I can run a KFBX file, a process plan KFBX file, in just the same way as a profile KFBX. There really isn't any difference between the two. Now, running a profile is one thing. The second question after that, of course, is knowing what happened while I processed that. I've already talked about that a little bit. You have this standard out that gets written to by pdfToolbox, and where you have these tabbed delimited lines with information, but there are a number of other ways you can get information out of a processing step. And if we go back to here, the first one, of course, is when I run a profile, I can also ask pdfToolbox to generate a number of reports. And how do we do that? Well, we can actually, if I can go back to what I did here, that's the pdfX1a profile that I ran on my test file. And what I can do is add a parameter for the profile, and the simplest form of such a parameter is report equals and then the type of report. If you look at the documentation, if you want, at the help, then you can see that the report type is the first one you have here is XML. Then I have a number of PDF reports, and then we have a template report, and I'll come back to that one. But you have all of the different types. You can specify when they should be generated. I can specify some additional options. For XML reports, I have specific options that can be added. And then for some of the other reports, I also have specific options that can be added. But what we'll do here is we'll choose for an XML report. It says here that the parameters are case insensitive and comma separated. So what I can do is say XML, comma, and I always wanted, doesn't have to be uppercase, but it's a habit. It's more readable to me if it's uppercase. Let's see if we get that correct. And if you look at the output, you can see that pdfToolbox says, finished with this input file that you gave me, I generated a report called valentine.xml, and it took, in this case, a second to process the file. You can already see that it took a little longer than the first time. And that is, of course, because pdfToolbox now generated this extra XML file. And if I open that XML file, you'll see why it takes a little longer. It's because this XML contains all of the information that is known about this, this pre-flight. If you haven't ever looked at the XML, this XML is typically something that is used if you start working with the command line, because you can generate the XML file and then use some further scripting to get information out of the XML. It looks very daunting. It's actually not that complicated. It's an XML that contains information about the document that was processed. So general document information, information about the pages, information about color spaces and fonts and images in the document. Then there is a section about the profile that was used. And that's a very long section because it contains information about all of the different conditions and rules and checks and fix-ups that were in that profile. And then at the very end, I have a section called results. And that results section contains an overview of the actual errors that were found during processing. And you can see that this information as well is quite extensive. It even has, and let me see an overview for that. So it even contains, for each error that is generated, hits information, and what is meant by hit is an object that caused this particular pre-flight check. So in this case, an image triggered the pre-flight check. It was on the page identified by page 1, which is likely the first page in the document. And then it even has the bounding box for that particular pre-flight error in the XML report as well. So if you generate an XML using the command line, it gives you all of the information you need to examine exactly what happened in that particular document. The annoying thing is that XML reports are very good for automated processing. However, they're not always that good to present to a user, because most users don't like reading XML files. Luckily, there is a way around that, and that is because I can have multiple report parameters on the same command line, and I can say report is template, for example, equals, and I'm not going to enter the, well, actually, I probably still have some of these here, so I could simply take one of the folders here and get going with that. So report is equals template means use the new template report that is included in pdfToolbox 7. In case you haven't heard about that, There is a webinar of about 45 minutes about pdfToolbox 7.2, and that contains an extensive demonstration of what you can do with these new HTML-based templates and how you can customize them to get exactly the results that you're looking for. So these things can be customized, colors, images, but much further as well. If you haven't heard of them and you want more information, look for the 7.2 webinar recording on the 4P support site, and you can see all about that. But so what we've done here is we've simply added two report parameters, and the first one tells pdfToolbox to generate an XML file. The second one tells pdfToolbox to generate one of those template reports. If you wanted to, you can add more of these report parameters, and pdfToolbox will simply generate all of those reports next to the input file. And that is something that is worth mentioning. I haven't specified any parameter here that says you need to generate the output here at this particular location. Of course, you can do that as well. If you look at the command line parameters, there are different parameters to specify the output file. That is the one that I would probably use here in this simple call where I run a simple profile on a file. So this would allow me to specify where the output file needs to be generated. Output folder specifies a folder where all of the output will be generated in. And this is especially useful if you have commands that generate more than one file. If I have a 10-page PDF file, and I use the save as image command, then I will get an image for each of the pages in that input file. And by specifying output folder, I'll be able to specify where all of those 10 output files will be generated. Also useful in that same list, and I'm looking for the command line parameter that says that there is something called digits, and so there's a few actually that are worth pointing out. There is a command line parameter that is called no progress, which will suppress some of this output information that pdfToolbox sends to standard out. So if you know that you're not looking at progress information, then you can just as well use no progress, because it will generate a little bit less output on the command line. And then there is a parameter that is called digits that influences how the output file is created. So in this case, it created a file where you have underscore and then 0001. If I specify digits is 5, for example, it will, in this case, generate 4 zeros and a 1 after that. So it allows you to create a padded output number for the output file, or if you generate multiple pages as well. And then the other one that I wanted to mention is suffix, which allows you to add a suffix to the file that was processed, and overwrite, which will not create one of these numbered output files if the file already exists, but will simply overwrite the original file or the file that is already there. So there are a couple of these that you need to look at when you build a command line, and that will influence how pdfToolbox processes the input file and where it will place the output, whether it will overwrite an existing file or not, and so on. We talked last week about running the command line, but if we talk about server, there is a concept that we talked about that is dispatcher and satellite that allows you to do load balancing across multiple machines. And of course, it would be very nice if we could also use the same technology when we deal with the command line. Let's say that we have a script. That script somehow is built into a website, or is called from an application like Switch or FileTrain or something else, and I still want to do load balancing. And then the question becomes, can I do that through the command line? And the answer is yes. And I'm going to start a new terminal window here. And let's see if I can go back to my pdfToolbox directory. And the first thing I'm going to do is set up my load balancing environment. And I could do this with the desktop application. As you saw last week, the desktop is really the user interface for pdfToolbox server. But because we're in the command line here, I don't want to do that. I want to show you how to do it with the command line. And in that case, what I need is, and I'll show you what the parameters are first of all. I need to start a dispatcher, and to start a dispatcher, I can use quiet, and in that case, it will not generate any output. I can give it an access key, and I can give it a custom port. Now, I'm going to be very, very simple about this. The only thing I'm going to do is help, and then dispatcher. And as you can see, that gives me a screen that will now be refreshed. It tells me that it started up pdfToolbox as a dispatcher. It tells me the version of pdfToolbox, and it will keep running as we go along. Now, the second thing I need is a satellite. So we'll do the same thing. See if we can go back to the pdfToolbox folder. And because I want the satellites in this case, I'm going to do the helpline for satellites. A satellite is the one that will actually process files. A dispatcher does nothing. The only thing it's good at is receiving files, receiving commands, and passing them on to a satellite. The satellite is the one that does the work and then returns it to the dispatcher when the work is done. So if I start pdfToolbox server as a satellite, then I need to tell it where the dispatcher is. And in order to do that, I have this endpoint parameter. And that I will use. So we'll say satellite, and I can say endpoint is, and I believe I can say localhost. Again, this gives me a screen that will be updated. It gives me some licensing information. It gives me the version that I'm running. It gives me the URL for the satellite itself and the location of the dispatcher. And in this case, everything is happening locally. So the URL I have here for the dispatcher is localhost. But of course, I could just as well start this up on a Linux machine somewhere else and then just point it to my Mac to connect it to a dispatcher. And the dispatcher will then say it now has one satellite available for processing. Now, we've done this. This sets up the environment that I need to do load balancing. Again, like we did last week, I could now start pdfToolbox desktop and connect with that running dispatcher, configure it, configure hot folders, and so on. But I can also now issue commands to the dispatcher, and those will then be executed by the satellite. And how do we do that? Well, let me go back to my help command. If I actually run something, so if I run a command line command with pdfToolbox, I have two parameters again that are useful. The first one is I can use endpoint to tell pdfToolbox where the dispatcher is, but most importantly, I can use the dist command line parameter to tell pdfToolbox not to execute a file locally on the server, which you can also do, but instead use the dispatching capability, and that means that the file that I pass, the whole command line that I pass to pdfToolbox will be taken together with the input file, with the profile, whatever else is necessary. It will be zipped up, given to a satellite that is free. The satellite is the one that will run your command line instructions on that file, and the results will be returned to the dispatcher. So this happens transparently. You don't really need to set up anything in any kind of special way. The only thing you need to do is pass these additional command line parameters, and then you're basically in a distributed environment for the command line, which is a very useful thing to do. I'm not going to go into a further demo for this at the moment because if I keep to the time, I only have 15 minutes left, and I do have some other things I want to talk about. And the first thing is there's the concept of variables and how you can handle those in a command line. The reason I want to focus on that is because variable profiles or dynamic profiles, we use both names interchangeably, are very, very useful in an automated environment. They allow me to create a profile or a process plan once, and then simply set the values that will be used, or toggle checks on and off or fixes on and off by passing on variables to pdfToolbox. And this can very nicely be done through a command line. To show that, I have a process plan here. We go immediately to a process plan. It also works for profiles, but this way you can see that it actually works for process plans as well. And if I go to the edit button in pdfToolbox desktop, that's the same process plan as I showed you before. It has a fix-up in here, and that fix-up is actually variable. It's actually this one, the second one. If I open up the fix-up, you can see that it does a bunch of stuff with setting page geometry boxes, and what it does is it allows me to set the trim box to absolute values. So I could say 0, 0, 100, 100, for example, and that would set the trim box to 0 millimeters from the left, 0 millimeters from the bottom, and then 100 millimeters right-hand side and top of the document. But I don't have fixed numbers in here. Instead, I have defined variables. These variables have a label. That label is used when you execute this process plan in pdfToolbox desktop. They have a default value that will be used if nothing is provided in terms of variables, and they have an internal name. And this is what is important when you work with pdfToolbox CLI, with the command line and a variable profile. So let me copy the internal name because we will need that in a second. But I'll also show you a way not to have to use pdfToolbox desktop for these. So I can do the same thing as what I've done a couple times before. I can say pdfToolbox, and then this is my process plan with variables, and then I have a PDF file. If I run this without doing anything more, then the process plan will be executed on my input file, and then the variable fix that I have in there will be executed with the default values that were provided. And as you could see in my fix-up, I have set all of those to 0. So that doesn't give you a very useful file. It would probably even generate a PDF file that cannot be opened because it has a 0 trim box. It's not a very valid file. So that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is provide other values for some of these variables. Now, how do we do that? Again, the answer is to look at the command line options that we have, and you can see that there is an option here that is called set variable, and that set variable option allows me to set a new value for whatever variables I have defined in that process plan or in that profile. So this is the internal name of that variable that was defined, then you have a colon, and then you have the value. So in my case, I could add set variable, an equal sign, then I have that internal name, and of course it didn't copy it correctly. That's usually what happens when I do these things. See, paste, no. So that was trimbox left, if I remember correctly, but I'll show you how to verify that in a second. Trimbox left, that is that internal name of the variable that I defined. Follow that with a colon, and then I could say 10 millimeters. And I can repeat that for all of the variables in my profile. Any of these set variable command line parameters that you add will simply instruct pdfToolbox to remember those values, and whenever it executes a profile that has those, or a process plan that has those variables defined, the value of those variables will be set to the value that I pass here. Now, what I just encountered is very common. You have a profile or a process plan. You know that there are variables defined in there, but you don't know what they are. There are a couple of ways you can go about that. You can do what I just did to show you where those variables were. I could go into pdfToolbox desktop and import this profile, and then open it up and try to figure out which of these steps is variable and so on. That's one. The second thing, and because we're working with the command line, that's usually much simpler. What I can also do is pdfToolbox, and then I have a command that is called list variables. It's a very simple one, so I'm not even going to bother looking up the help. And I simply, as a command line parameter, add the profile or process plan that I want to check. And then you can see that pdfToolbox does two things. First of all, it runs over the different steps in that process plan. And you can see that I have a set page box. You actually have one fix-up that is variable. And then for that one fix-up that is variable, it lists all of the content for that fix-up. And if you remember correctly, I had 3 set page box steps in that one fix-up. Only one of them was variable, and you can see that whole definition here as well. At the end, and this is quite confusing to look through, it's also tab delimited, but at the end of the output for a list variables command, I have a very neat tabbed delimited list of all of the variables that are defined. So this is each time the internal name of that variable. That's the thing that you need to use for set variable. And then you have a column that contains the default value. So the value that is used if you don't do anything specific in there. If you don't know what the variables are in a process plan or a profile, simply run the list variables command, and that will tell you exactly which variables are there and what the internal name is that you need in order to set their value. Now, why is this useful? Well, of course, you can easily think of all kinds of scenarios. This fix-up or process plan that I showed you here was actually part of a larger script where I do tiling with pdfToolbox. So I take a large banner PDF, for example, and I create cutouts. I create 4 or 6 different parts out of the original file by setting a different trim box for each part. And then use the imposition engine that we'll talk about next week to put all of those parts on their own sheet together with some marks around that. And of course, this is something that we were looking at for a large format workflow. But it's just one application. You could also, for example, retrieve information about the size of a file, a PDF file, the page size that you want, and then make a profile that has a number of fixed pre-flight checks, but that has one variable pre-flight check where the trim size of the document is checked according to information that you get from somewhere else. And then again, you can use these set variable commands to specify how the trim size needs to be checked for. So what the actual values are that you want to check the trim size for. And the advantage here, of course, is that you can create one profile. You don't have to create multiple profiles for uh, different specifications of jobs or products or whatever you want to call it. You simply create one profile and create a command line that feeds into that profile the correct values. Now, the last point perhaps, and I will still be longer than 1 hour, but the last point perhaps is if you do all of this, especially if you start working with variables and you have a wide number of options. There is one more that I need to talk about when I conclude this. But as you start adding stuff to the command line, it's very easy to imagine that you'll end up with a very long command line. And there are a couple of problems with that. The first problem is that it's easy to make mistakes when you do command line. So sometimes it's easier to think of something once and then simply reuse the brain waves you've already spent on that. The other problem is that command lines can be limited in length. Depending on the operating system, you might actually run into a situation where your command line becomes too long to be executed properly by the operating system. And that would be a shame, of course. And of course, there is a solution for that. And I'll use the save as image command to show you how that works. So what we'll do is pdfToolbox, save as image. I'm going to be brave and not use the help functionality. And then I'll use, again, let me throw out some of the junk we've created here. I'll use the test file for today, and I'm simply going to say execute. And what you can see is that I get a JPEG file. And of course, it's a themed JPEG file given the time of year, but I got a JPEG file from that PDF file. So save as image generates an image for me. And as you saw before, save as image has a whole multitude of command line parameters. And of course, I always forget what they are. So I can look them up. Help save as image gives me the whole list of command line parameters. Wouldn't it be easy if I could in some way remember what these are or store what these are? And yes, you can actually do that. What I can do is return to our save as image command, and I'll add an @ sign. And then I have prepared this nice file here, which is called a response file. I'll open it in a second so that you can see what is in there. If I add that response file, all of a sudden I get a TIFF file as output, and it's actually a high-resolution TIFF if I'm not mistaken. And we'll go one step further. I'll add another @ sign, and then I'm going to add, well, I don't want to add an additional one. I simply want another one here. Okay, that could have been RGB. That could have been better. Let's try that. There we go, and that generates a second file for me. As you can see, I don't use the override parameter, so when it generates output and the output already exists, it keeps adding new files by adding additional numbers at the end here. And if I look at this, I now have two files. One of the two is CMYK, the other one is RGB. So obviously there are command line parameters in these response files, and that's exactly what they are. What happens here, if I open that in a text editor, what you can see is that a response file has a very simple format. I can enter comments, which is often useful to remember afterwards what you've done. I can enter comments, and a comment line has to start with this pound sign at the beginning. So everything else is on the line is discarded. I can have blank lines if I want, and I can have command line parameters. And each command line parameter in a response file should be on its own line. and they are exactly the same command line parameters that you can use on an actual command line. However, because you can put a whole bunch of them together in a response file, it provides a very easy way to keep the actual command line simple. You simply have the save as image command, for example, as I did here, and then afterwards you specify the file that needs to be processed, and you specify the actual response file, and pdfToolbox will execute this exactly the same as if you typed this on the command line. So especially when you start using variables, now it becomes very easy. I can say set variable, and then the format was, well, if I do this trimbox stuff, I could say trimbox left is 50, and you simply create as many of these lines as you want. That will set all of the values for these variables correct, and it will not make your command line overly long. Using these response files is actually one of the ways in which you can do nifty localization or customization of the error messages that are generated by a profile. And just to talk about that 2 seconds, if I look at a profile and I want something that has custom checks and fixes. So if I open it up, these custom checks have a name and a description. The name is typically what is used in the results that pdfToolbox generates. So if you look at the pre-flight reporting, at the reporting that it does, either in XML or in the stuff that it writes to standard out, then this is typically what you'll get there. And as you can see, this is also controllable through variables. So I could actually specify a variable for this. And if I do this for all of the checks that I have in a custom profile that I create, and then afterwards I have a response file that I pass while I'm executing the profile, then I can use set variable to define what the text is going to be that is shown for each of these variables. It's a little bit of a perhaps awkward way of or elaborate way to do customization or to provide custom messages, but it is a way to customize in great detail what the output is going to be for a profile. So remember that you have these response files, and like I said, the format is very easy, and its most easy form, it is one command line parameter per line, and then the ability to add comments to those as well. One last thing, everything I've been doing here was locally on my Mac, and then there typically aren't too many concerns about security and access rights and anything like that. Just keep in mind that if you are running pdfToolbox on a web server, for example, that the process that runs pdfToolbox typically should be a restricted process. You don't want that to run as root on your Linux machine or Windows machine or Mac for that matter. And that can mean that you have a restricted environment, and that pdfToolbox will not be able to write to just about any folder that it wants to write to. There is one very important command line parameter that you need to think about, and let me, for one last time, issue the help command. If I go to the command line parameters here and you look at there are always too many of them here, cache folder. Cache folder sets, as it says, a cache folder path for pdfToolbox. What is important is that this is the folder that will be used for anything that is written by pdfToolbox in that case. So all of the information that is written to disk will end up in that folder, and that makes it a very important parameter on a restricted environment. So what you would do is you would set up a folder that pdfToolbox can use. You make sure that pdfToolbox command line, that process or the user that runs that process has access to that folder, and that the user can actually write to that folder, and then you simply provide that folder with a command line parameter, the cache folder parameter, to each command line call that you do in that environment. And that will make sure that you don't have to give your user too much access to the web server that you're running on, or whatever other server that you're running it on, and that pdfToolbox is still capable of writing cache files and other temporary information. There is an overview or a cache for the fonts that are available, for example. So it will give pdfToolbox a folder where it can write that information when it needs to. Let me go back to the agenda and finish this up. So we've talked a little bit about the command line versus the server, and the fact that you can very easily test command line on Mac and Windows because it's simply installed with pdfToolbox server. We talked about the different platforms and flavors. We talked about the documentation for the command line that you certainly are free to read, but also about the help command that provides a very good alternative to the documentation, especially when you're quickly trying to refresh your memory about a particular command and all of the command line parameters that are useful for that particular command. So remember that --help command, because it's your best friend when you're working with pdfToolbox CLI. We talked about running profiles and how running a process plan is exactly the same as running a profile. We talked about performing actions in pdfToolbox, and you've seen a number of examples. You've also seen the long list of actions that is available for the command line. We talked about how to run a dispatcher and set up a dispatcher satellite environment using the command line. So that way that works even on a Linux environment where you don't have pdfToolbox and desktop to start the server or the dispatcher or a satellite. And then we talked about some more advanced stuff like setting a proper cache folder for the pdfToolbox command line environment, and using variables and setting variables on the command line, and using response files to make sure that your command line doesn't become too long when you're working with this. That's all I had for today. I can see that there has been one question that was already answered. I assume by Mark. Thank you for that. If there are any other questions, feel free to enter them into the question box for GoToWebinar right now. If there aren't any immediate questions, you can always come back later, send us an email, and ask whatever question you have that is specific for your environment. Just send an email to support@calassoftware.com or support@4ps.com. That both ends up in our support tracking system, and that will allow us to get back to you quickly. If you have any commercial questions about pdfToolbox, of course, you can also simply send the email to info@4ps.com or info@calassoftware.com, and we'll be able to help you with that as well. As there are no more questions, and I'm already 10 minutes over the time I had allotted for this, the only thing that rests is to thank you for coming to this second part of the pdfToolbox automation webinar series. Next week, we have an even more exciting episode about using the imposition engine in pdfToolbox. And then the last one, 2 weeks from now, will be about the new template format and how to do all kinds of exciting things with generating template reports, JavaScript, CSS, and all kinds of other nice features in pdfToolbox. Okay, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing all of you next week, and have a great day.